I remember as a young seminarian in my first 2 years of seminary here at St. John's Seminary in the Archdiocese of Boston, your first studies are philosophy. And so here I was with my classmates studying for 2 years philosophical studies, logic. And I remember thinking at that time that my mother, my father, and certainly her generation, many who had attended Catholic universities, knew more philosophy after 36 years than I did actively studying it while I was in the seminary. It just reminds us so much that what was so presumed, sort of Christian philosophy, Christian theology, is no longer something we can take for granted. As a priest now assigned to the seminary faculty and as a spiritual director to the homeschooling families here in the Archdiocese of Boston, and having 32 nieces and nephews, many in schools here, both parochial, public, and now in some universities throughout the Northeast, I'm very aware of just sort of the needs of an education not only in the things of this world, but if you will, a fuller, more broader, in a genuine, authentic sense, a liberal education of all things from whom they come. Many of our schools today are remodeling themselves on a classical education or a great books education. And it's very encouraging, it's very exciting, especially for our young people. I know one of my nephews in one of these schools out in Natick, St. Benedict Elementary School, he comes home as a kindergarten and singing Latin and knowing more Greek and verses than I ever even heard of. But it's exciting because it's the more full breadth of learning. St. Paul reminds us that that basic fundamental gift of knowledge that begins with reason, logic, is so necessary. He himself, as he begins his ministry, the greatest preacher in the history of Christendom, begins to preach to the Greeks, to the Athenians, and he does so with just more simple logic. He uses that beautiful example that you have an altar to an unknown God, where we have a God who's revealed himself as a personal, loving, personal God. And then he goes on to declare Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, as the one true God of all creation and Creator itself. In many ways in our lives, there are persons that we love dearly. They could be our own family members, nieces, nephews, grandchildren. They could be our neighbors or friends. They could be our children's friends or co-workers. Many who no longer really have accepted the simplicity of our faith and its purity because they have not had the benefit any longer of what St. John Paul II used to say, they're just living sort of a practical atheism. Even all of us at times, myself included, Catholics in the pews when we are there, slip into this sense that outside of the church, outside of the morning mass on Sunday, that we just live of the world. And we need that moment to shock us, if you will, to bring us back. There is a living God, and I conform my life to his way of life, because that's where joy and happiness is. And that's what Paul reminds us so many times in his own readings. We do have to have a reason for our faith. And when we do, we know that the Holy Spirit, as Jesus has sent the advocate, will inebriate. He'll just sanctify our words, our thoughts, so that we speak what is of the Father to all those that we love, to stir alive in them a desire to come to or return to the fullness of life, the practice of our Catholic faith. And so as we begin today approaching the season of a Pentecost, this novena of days between the Ascension Thursday, which we will celebrate here in the Archdiocese of Boston tomorrow, towards the Sunday Pentecost, just simply in our morning prayers before our feet even hit the ground, just take that moment and say, "Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, saturate, inebriate, come into my heart, conform my heart, make me unto thine." And begin each of the days and maybe end those days in such a way so that truly the gift of Jesus Christ will be known to many, one day to all, for the glory of his Son, for the glory of our Father.